On today's show, we'll be talking about a strange experience in the forest, a midnight visitor, and much more. All coming up on this episode of Paranormal Mysteries. Thank you all for joining me and welcome to the show. I'm your host, as always, Nick Ryan. I hope everyone had a great weekend. And before we start, I'd like to say thank you to Dakota, M, Tylin, Alessandra, Maya, Chris and Nikki, and Aaron for their support and generosity. If you enjoy the show, please remember to subscribe, share, and review the podcast. This supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. And if you'd like to support us even further by becoming a patron or by donating, please visit us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. These links and others can be found within the show notes. And if you've encountered the paranormal and would like to share your story, please email me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com. All experiences, no matter how big or small, are always welcome. And with that in mind, our first story comes to us from Sophia. And Sophia says, "This occurred just last week, so it is very fresh. I am able to speak and see spirits, including evil ones. This is very helpful in many instances, but sometimes I don't enjoy it. My bedroom is on the second floor of my house, and my home was built before I was born many years ago. When you enter my room, on the left is my bed, lined up with the wall, facing the opposite wall. In front of my bed is my closet door, which I always keep closed and locked because I get a bad vibe from it. There is a large window right across from my bedroom door when you first enter, and if you look down out of the window, there is a small seating area around a fire pit in my backyard, and about 50 feet beyond that are deep woods. I don't like to look out of my window at nighttime because it gives off a very scary vibe all the time, as if I'm being watched. But no one can look through a second-story window, right? Not without a ladder, and there's only one ladder in my house hanging up at the top of the garage, and it is very difficult to get down. One day I got home from a horseback riding lesson, and I was very tired, so I decided to put more comfortable clothes on and take a nap. I woke up about 3 hours later facing my wall, and I could not turn over. Not because I didn't want to, but because something was telling me not to. I could feel as if something or someone was staring dead at me from behind. I tried to close my eyes and go back to sleep, but I could not. I sat there for easily 45 minutes to an hour, scared to move at all. My mom eventually came in, and there was this feeling of safety that fell over me. I sat up, and immediately I looked over at my window, and it turns out it was a 6-hour nap. I hadn't realized it, and my mom had just wanted to check on me. I stared at my window for about 30 seconds, and nothing looked off about it, and I couldn't explain what I felt. The next day, I was just sitting in my room feeding my lizard, and I felt the same feeling from that day before. I wanted to look over, but I couldn't, so I just slightly gazed over to my window, and I saw a clear image of a person staring at me, and then I got very terrified, and slowly started to walk to my bedroom door. But the thing outside moved with me, and I realized that I couldn't leave my room. I hadn't seen an entity like it before, but it seemed to give off a very evil vibe and intentions. I yelled for my mom to come up to my room, but there was no answer. I quickly realized that I was alone and noticed that the figure was moving closer to my window, but I was not moving. I then heard footsteps in the hallway, and I tensed up. They weren't just any footsteps, they were a young child's footsteps, but I don't have any younger siblings. It was the young girl that I had met just a few weeks ago that had died in a terrible car accident that I also witnessed, and she walked into my room, looked at me confused, glanced over to the window, and dashed over to it. She had actually scared off the man, and her and I then went down to my kitchen and waited for my mom to get home. After my mom came in the door, the little girl said goodbye and then disappeared. I told my mom everything that happened, and she believed me. She agreed to let me sleep with her for the next few nights, and I felt very safe and loved. But that feeling didn't last long, when one night I woke up around 3:30 a.m. and looked around the room. My eyes stopped at one of the large windows that she has in her room, and there was the large figure outside the window. I could not move, but I could speak. I whispered to my mom, and she woke up and looked over to the window. She also noticed it, but she pointed out that her room was also on the second floor, and easily a 50-foot climb and/or fall. The little girl made an appearance in my mom's bedroom doorway, and I called her over, but told her to walk slowly. My mom's bedroom is just set up a little different. When you open the door, there is a wall you have to walk past before entering the actual room. But when you walk past the wall, the window is immediately to the left, and it overlooks the driveway, which is very dark and creepy at night. The little girl, which I later learned her name was Alice, listened to me and slowly walked into the room. As soon as she realized what was happening, she got a very angry look on her face and stomped the rest of the way in. She started staring at the figure, and she lunged at the window. There was a loud sound outside, and I got up and looked out the window. Alice was right beside me, and she held my hand. The person was on the ground and didn't move, and Alice told me that she recognized this person as her dead father. I looked farther into this and found out what had happened when she was alive. Alice and her family lived in my house before we did. She lived there with her family in 1980 to 1985. Before she died there. Her father was very abusive, and Alice and her mom were abused on a daily basis. Her mom had tried to stand up to him one day because she had had enough of everything that he had done. Alice's dad took out a knife and stabbed her mom to death, and then searched Alice out and stabbed her as well. Alice died in my bedroom, and her mom died in my mom's bedroom. The man was her father, and he was planning on killing me and my mom next. But since Alice went to heaven and was only 5, she had a lot more power over her dead dad now. Alice has claimed me as her mother figure on Earth, while her mom does not have enough energy to come down from heaven. I have not seen the man since, but sometimes I get the feeling of being watched from my window. Our next story of the night comes to us from JM, and JM's story is called UFO Visit. JM says, I stumbled upon your podcast while at the gym and really enjoy it, and I feel able to share my experience, which I hope is not too long of a story. When I was in the 8th grade, I was spending the night at a friend's house when we were planning to film a prank video about a ghost. Part of the video took us outside, which is when we saw a pair of lights in the sky, which made no sound, but were low enough that if it were a plane, we would have heard it. I tried recording it on my phone, but couldn't manage to get a good shot because my phone wasn't the greatest at the time, but it was an eerie experience nonetheless. Maybe a month or so afterward, I had a bout of sleep paralysis, which wasn't uncommon, but what stood out was what I found in the morning. Laying on the ground were multiple pairs of white socks that were balled up and set in a formation of an arch, with what I could only describe as a backwards and upside down lowercase y. Also a face of what I could make out that looked like an image of a generic-looking gray alien in my sheets. I just thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but part of me felt the need to tell my family, who obviously thought I was watching too much stuff on YouTube. But after messaging my friend DC, he replied with a worrisome, "Where did you see this, and when?" After telling him, he sent a photo of the exact same image, only on a mirror written in shower steam. At first, I thought I was playing into a joke that would cause me to be made fun of. At least that's how I felt, until I realized that I was texting him at roughly 7 to 8 p.m. at night, which, in California, it was dark outside at this time of the year, but the image that he had taken showed that it was sunny outside from the window that I could make out, and he said that he took it at the same time that I saw mine. Nothing else ever came of it, and maybe it's just a possible coincidence, or maybe something more that I've held on to for 12 years. Love your show, and keep it up. Our next listener story comes to us from Mark, and Mark's story is called Devil on My Back. Mark says, Hello, Nick. I love your podcast with the open, non-judgmental platform. I've heard a lot on your show about sleep paralysis and wanted to share this. From around the age of 6 or 7, I used to have reoccurring dreams where I would be lying face down, usually outdoors, in the mud. Someone who I took to be the devil would be kneeling on my back, digging their knuckles into my backbone. During these times, I would usually wake up face down, unable to move or even call for help. After some time, the devil would leave, and I could move again. Thankfully, the dreams became less frequent over time. When I was about 16, I found a sharp and heavy axe-head-like piece of basalt rock while out bicycling one day. It was pretty cool, and I took it home. I hadn't had the devil dream for a couple of years, but one night soon after that, I had it, for the last time. There was the devil on my back again, but this time I somehow had the sharp stone in my hand. I rose up out of my body, and I fought back. This devil turned out to be a large, muscular, bald white man in a black leather jacket. He had a third eye in his forehead, and we were fighting on top of a grassy hill in a park. I dreamt that I struck him on the head with the stone and killed him. I am now in my 50s and have never had the devil dream again, and I still keep the stone by my bedside, just in case. Thank you for reading. Mark. Our next listener story comes to us from Candace, and Candace's story is called Midnight Visitor. Candace says, I remember laying in my bed in the dark with my German Shepherd dog, Sasha, and I remember waking up to Sasha growling at the closet in my bedroom. I just rolled over as this was normal for her and fell back to sleep. I really wish I had just stayed awake, because what happened next would terrify me, even to this day. I was asleep, and in my dream I was walking around our home, and I walked into my father's room, and there was at least 6 dark, cloaked shadow creatures around my father. All 6 creatures had no eyes, no lips, and no nose. Their eyes were dark, open sockets, and all of their appendages were twice the length they should have been. One of them was leaning over my father chanting something in an odd language that I didn't understand. One of them pointed at me, and they all looked at me. I ran in my dream as fast as I could, back to my bed, where I was attacked by one of them, and it clawed my back. I woke up and I was uncontrollably trembling. My dog was still barking at the closet, and I could not move from my bed. I immediately started to pray, and as soon as I could, I rolled off my bed and hit the floor and crawled to the door. I got to my feet and walked into my father's room, and he was okay. I then went to the living room and watched RV until the sun rose the next morning. When I walked to the bus stop to go to school the next morning, an old woman in a black dress and veil watched me the entire time. I could barely breathe, and she gave me the creeps as I tried not to look at her. I was afraid that if I looked at her for too long, I would die a very gory death, and I watched until the bus came. Later that day, I had one of the worst nosebleeds on the bus going home. I told my dad and brother what had happened, and they did not believe me. I didn't have a scratch on my back, but my back hurt in the spot where I was attacked by what I call the Rippers. Thank you for reading my story. Stay safe, Candace. Our next story of the night comes to us from Essence, and Essence's story is called Jeff's Antics. Essence says, Hi Nick, I wanted to thank you for reading my first letter on the show. It was so fun hearing my stories being shared with others. I wanted to write in again and fill you in about more of my experiences with the presence in our house that we call Jeff. Shortly after writing in with my first experience, I had a strange encounter. I was preparing to straighten my hair, and I had gathered my tools and sat on the couch. As I began to do my hair, my fiancé said that we needed to run an errand, so I unplugged the straightener and left everything where it was. 10 minutes later, we returned home, and I continued with my hair. As I sat down, I realized that I could not find my comb. I looked everywhere, under the blanket, between the couch cushions, the floor, and the bathroom. I thought I was losing my mind. My third time looking, I huffed under my breath, Jeff, stop messing with me and give me my comb back. I then walked away, and as I left the living room, I had a feeling of something telling me to look on the couch again. When I did, there was my comb in the corner of my couch cushion, where I had already looked at least 5 times. The next experience was a week before Christmas. I was making my homemade desserts to sell, and I had set my ingredients out on the stove. I was melting chocolate in a pot, and I had arranged waffle sugar cones on a cookie sheet. I had a lot to coat with chocolate, so I had flipped them in alternating directions so that more of them would fit on the tray. After getting all my cones laid out and my ingredients close together, I turned to check my phone and look at my recipe. When I turned back around, I noticed that the top of the row of cones were all facing the same direction. I instantly texted my friend that believes in the paranormal as well, and she laughed and said, "Oh, the Fae. They love to mess with people." I first thought that I might have moved them, but I knew that I had taken the time to flip half of them upside down to make them all fit. I shook it off and said out loud for him to not bother my food, as I plan to sell it, and I need it to be perfect. I know he loves it when I cook, and that's usually when I experience the most activity, but I have not had him visit me since then. Thanks for reading my stories, and I hope to write again soon with other stories and past experiences. Be safe out there. Essence. Our next story comes to us from Kaylin, and Kaylin's story is called My Forest Experiences. Kaylin says, "Hi Nick, I've been a fan of yours for a while, and I have always loved binging your work while drawing and such. Anyway, let me get straight to the point. Near my home I have a small forest path, and ever since moving into my house, the first thing I explored was the forest. But every time I think of it, it sends chills down my spine. The first time I ever explored it, I decided to visit the area where a small pond was nearby. As you walk by, you could see the river and pond that was near the path. This path was open to the public, and of course everyone loved walking their dogs there, and jogging, and taking strolls in general. I always had small things happen to me when I was there, including a time when I found a small teddy bear pierced into a fence gate, and a small sign next to it that said, Tea Party. For a few weeks it never really scared me, and I told these stories to my friends. They all told me not to worry too much, so that's what I did. Now, the point of telling this story is that as I'm writing this, small paranormal occurrences took place ever since that day, but nothing has really occurred for around 2 or 3 months. It started one night when I had my first case of sleep paralysis, and of course I was riddled with fear. I couldn't move my body, but with my peripheral vision, I noticed a black figure in the corner of my room. It took the shape of a man with a hat, but as I looked away it disappeared, and I could suddenly move again. I got up and went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror before telling myself that it was just in my head, and I headed back to bed. A few days later, very small occurrences took place, and it always happened when I was the only one home. Things such as my hair being pulled, small black figures in dark areas, such as my closet, and footsteps on my wooden floor in the middle of the night. My closet has a mirror, and sometimes I would see the figure in my reflection, but when I turned around, it had always disappeared. I know this doesn't seem to be the scariest thing ever, but I feel as though ever since I visited that forest, some sort of spirit has followed me back. Nobody believes me, which is understandable, because it does sound crazy, but ever since these occurrences, I have always been cautious. Sometimes I feel as though I hear voices in the woods, like faint chuckles or a woman's voice. I always told myself that it was just someone who was in the forest with me, but sometimes I would never see anyone on my walk. I will definitely email you again if something else occurs, and I hope you enjoyed my story, and I hope you and everyone else are staying safe during this difficult time. Sincerely, Kaylin. Our last story of the night comes to us from John, and John's story is called Dogman. John says, "Hi there. A friend of mine just turned me on to your podcast, and I'm liking it. I started with some back episodes that are of personal interest, and I came across the Dogman episodes, and for the longest time, I thought that I was completely nuts. I live in southeast Connecticut and deliver newspapers at night. A few years back, I was on a farm road at the dead end of a town road, turning around, and I saw this big dog, bigger than anyone I have ever seen. It looked like it was eating something in the road, like a rabbit or something, so I drove a little closer to get a better look, and the thing reared up and looked at me dead in the eye. I froze and the damn thing got up on 2 legs and ran off into the woods. This was at about 2:30 a.m., and I don't talk to many people about this. I'm really liking the podcast. Keep up the great work. John. As we come to the end of tonight's episode, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And a special thank you goes out to Sophia, JM, Mark, Candace, Essence, Kaylin, and John for sharing their experiences. If you've witnessed something that you can't explain, please email me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit us at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. And until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy beginning to your week, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday with our next episode. From everyone at Paranormal Mysteries, thank you for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.